Hey friends, Patrick here, and today we're going to talk about the specification pattern. Well, a variation of the specification pattern, because we had this question in the community of the .NET Web Academy, and I thought, why not spread the word as well here on YouTube, of course. So now in this tutorial, we are going to talk about how to make your repositories a bit cleaner, maybe, right? So I think the specification pattern is pretty nice for this matter. And if you like this tutorial, learn something, you know the drill, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel so I know you care. It does make a difference. Thank you so much. And also thank you very, very much to all my patrons. If you want to support me too, I will love you forever. Check out the link in the video description. And now let's start with the tutorial. All right, now first a quick overview what we've got here so far. The idea is a simple .NET 8 Web API with controllers, please. And here we wanna get a list of games. All right, so this is everything so far. We have a game controller, and here we get a list of all games. For that, we're using an in-memory entity framework 8 database here, and we're seeding the database down here, right? So here's the seed data function with games like Skyrim, Witcher, Call of Duty. As you can see, it seems, according to Visual Studio, that Witcher and Skyrim is not really a word, so I just leave that here. Tell me what you think about that in the comments, please. And regarding the games, we have got a base entity with an ID, date created, date updated, and then here's the game, which is a base entity, and they've got genres and DLCs. And by the way, if you hear some strange or funny noises, this is my baby girl currently in the baby sling here learning .NET with me, of course. Anyways, so here again, the program CS. So here we use the in-memory database, and here you see our repository, right? And so far we only have one method here to get all the games. And as you can see, I think you know this when you know repositories with entity framework. We access the data context, access the games, a table, and just return them as a list. And now the thing is regarding the specification pattern. So what does this mean? Now here in this tutorial, I will show you, let's say, a variation. Already told you that in the intro, but again, a variation of the specification pattern, because what you can do with specifications is that you add several rules and then combine them left and right, strange things like that, and then say, okay, for instance, I want to include now for the games genres. All right, so this would be one rule. And then I also want to include not the game's name, but the game DLCs. And then, for instance, I have a where condition here, a criteria, let's say, where I wanna get the games where the genre, I don't know, I think you get the idea, is RPG, for instance, right? So these can be several rules like that, of course. But what I want to do here, and this is again another kind of specification pattern, if we have stuff like that, and we have lots of stuff like that in a repository, meaning also nested entities in there. Maybe you want to combine several entities and not only one single entity like the game. Maybe there's also the publisher. I don't know, all the stuff that you can imagine. Then it can get messy in our repositories. And this is where specifications come in. Meaning we remove all that, all right? And instead we write specifications, and then we only have 1 or 2 lines in our controller in the end, in this example at least, where we put specifications in, and these specifications then will return the data that we want from our repository. Now, enough talking about that. Let's just implement that now. And the first thing we need are the base specification models. So let's create a new folder. Real quick, I'm currently creating a .NET 8 Web Dev Jumpstart course, which will be available for free. We're going to have a look at web APIs and entity framework there, for instance. And if you want to be the first to know when this thing is available, then I recommend just check out the link in the video description, and I will send you an email when you can get it. So scroll a bit further down, and then you know what to do. And now let's continue with the tutorial. Folder, and here we call this specifications. And our first model now is the specification. All right, simple as that. And this thing now is actually a public abstract class, so we can only inherit from that thing. And this thing also gets a generic, an entity. And this entity should not only be a class, it should actually be a base entity. And sorry if you hear the noise from outside, it is really hot in here, so I had to open the window. But I think you can still understand me. Tell me if not in the comments, please. Now we need a constructor and then another constructor where I wanna put an expression. And in this expression, then we can set our lambda expression, as you know, probably from your where statement, right? So in here, what we have is, again, an expression with a function, so the predicate with the t entity and bool, and we call this thing now the criteria, all right? And in the end, we have the same thing as a property here as well. So expression again, function, all right, that's it. But please in uppercase C, and down here then we set the criteria to the given criteria, and this thing only has a getter. Now let's already just leave it at that and make this, by the way, also nullable, so the warning is gone. And of course we will add more. So with that, we have the criteria that we can use in our where statements. But of course, if you want to include some stuff and maybe order some stuff, then we have to implement some more. But first, let's try it like that, because the specification pattern, it could be or seem a bit complex in the beginning, and this is what I don't want to teach you here, right? I don't want to scare you and telling you upfront, okay, you have to do all these lines, you have to implement all that stuff to make this work. This is the only thing, the first thing we want to implement, just the criteria. And with this criteria, then we can use our where statement in a couple of minutes. But first, or the next step would be, after this base specification class, let's say, we need also a query builder, also called an evaluator. So back to the solution explorer, and here now, let's add another item, and this shall be the specification query builder, all right? And that's now a static class, and this thing also gets a static method class, of course, and this shall be public static, and then returning an I queryable with, again, an entity. And this thing now can be called get query, build query, whatever you like, again with our entity. And regarding the arguments, we first need, in fact, not this, but I queryable t entity, and then an input query. All right, so the first data set, in essence, what we will get, and in our examples, this will simply be the context games. Okay, so all the games, for instance, from the database. And the next thing then is the specific specification. All right, so here now we put a specification again for our entity here, and we call this also specification, simple as that. And again, we say the t entity should be a base entity. All right, and now regarding the body, now it's getting even more interesting, of course. First, our resulting query is the input query. This is already a queryable, so we don't need the as queryable call. And here we first ask, do we have a criteria? So if specification criteria is not null, and then in that case, there it is. We just say our query now is query where specification criteria, and in the end, we return our query. All right, so again, just to make this clear, we have our first class, the specification itself with a certain entity. We have one constructor where we already can set a criteria, and then we have a query builder that grabs this specification and an input query, and out of that uses the criteria, so our lambda expression in the end, and just uses the where function here to get then the resulting query. That's it so far. So now let's say we go to our game repository and we would like to get all the games again where the genre name is RPG. So what we would do is where and then X or G for game, and then lambda expression genre name equals RPG. All right, something like that. We turn this into a list, and as you can see here in our seeding data, we've got the genre RPG, and here we've got 2 games where the genre is the RPG genre. All right, so this should then be our result set, but let's do it now another way. So here we have our function where we get the complete list, and now it would make sense actually to only write one more method, so it would be a bit more generic. And let's call this method simply getGames, but this getGames method then gets a specification, or the argument for this, the parameter for this method would then be a specification. So here it would be returning a list of games, call this getGames, but it gets a specification with the game type, and we call this specification and add the using directive, of course. And now let's implement that thing here, implement interface. And here now what we do is we simply say return specification query builder. From that we call our getQuery method. Our input query now would be context games, and we put the specification here, and in the end again turn this into a list. So here we put a specification, and then with the help of the specification query builder we get the result set from all our games, but then the specific result set with the help of the specification. I hope this is clear, or this will become clear now when we create our specification. And this is what we do here again in the specifications folder. We just add another item, and for instance we call this now RPG games specification. Remember, we want to get all the games that have the genre RPG. And this is actually pretty simple now, because we inherit from a specification with the type game at the using directive, and now here our constructor where we use the base constructor now with the criteria. So G for game, not global, and then G genre name equals RPG. All right, and for now we just say this thing has a genre and the warning is gone, and that's it. This is our specification. So we have now moved our lambda expression from the where statement. I know what you may be thinking. Wouldn't it be easier to just write a method in the repository, put the where statement there? Yeah, of course, it would be easier for this one single line of code, but with that you have, in the end, when this thing is growing, more options, and it will probably be cleaner. All right, and in the end it's just another way to do this, and it's totally up to you if you want to use the specification pattern here or not. But again, this is just one way to implement your repositories. So we've got our specification here, and now how would we use it in the game controller? I know this probably shouldn't be done here because then it's somehow a fat controller. So here now I want to add another endpoint where I already use the generic getGames method from the repository, but maybe in a real world application you would put a service in between. So you have your controller, then the service, and then the service is calling the repository. Again, totally up to you. But here now, let's just copy that, put it here, add a simple route like RPG, for instance, and here we call this now getRPGGames. All right. And here we now say var spec for specification is a new RPG games specification. All right, this line actually isn't even really necessary because we could put it here as well. And now here we say game repository get games with our specification, and that's it. Okay, let's just run this And then let's see what's happening. So you see, we have our two endpoints now. The first thing is the endpoint where we get all our games, Skyrim, Witcher 3, Call of Duty. Nothing is included here. And now let's have a look at the RPG endpoint. Works like that. We've got Skyrim and Witcher 3. Perfect. But as I now told you, we have nothing included. So we do not see the genre. We do not see the DLCs. So what if we want to have that as well? Again, we would have to write our includes, and for that we can also improve our specification class. So here now we do not only want a criteria, but we also want includes and maybe also some ordering. So let's add another property here. And this is this time a list of expressions for the includes, because we could include lots of stuff, of course. So here now, expression, and then again, function, t entity. Here now, the result is an object. Could also be null, actually. We call this thing now includes. Also only a getter, and let's just initialize that already with a new, yeah, something like that, or just the parenthesis. Again, totally up to you. And another thing I would like to add again is the order by expression. So prop expression func, almost func t entity object, could also be null. I think this is too much. And we call this simply order by a getter. And here now we need a private setter. Why, you will see in a minute. First thing we need is to set the, or add the includes, a protected void add include method, again with an expression, but I am getting lazy now. So here add include with an expression called include expression, and here we say includes add include expression, simple as that. And another one, protected void add order by, another expression, call this now the order by expression. And here, that's why we need the setter now. Order by is the order by expression, not this one, that one. All right, so again, if you wouldn't have the setter here, wouldn't work. All right. So that's it. So this is now our specification class. Again, we could also add something like add order by descending, and also the property here, pretty much the same stuff. But now for our query builder, also relatively straightforward. We check if the includes and the order by are not null, and then, well, use them. Interesting will be the includes, because we'll use the aggregate function here. So if specification includes is not null, then we say query is specification includes, and then aggregate. As you can see here, this thing applies an accumulator function over a sequence. So for every include, we want to do something here. And what we need is first our query, then the current, and then an include. And here now we say for the current version, the current state, let's say we add include. So again, we're using now the include function and provide or use this include here, the one that's the current one in this sequence. All right, and now the last thing, if specification order by is not null, then we say query is query order by specification order by. That's it. And again, order by descending would be again exactly the same thing. Okay, so this is now also our query builder. And now let's create our specification, our specific specification. Now I want the RPG games, but also include the DLCs and the genres. So right click, add another item, call this RPG games with DLCs specification, for instance. And again, use the specification class here with the game class. And here we have our constructor. Again, we use the base constructor where we only, come on, want the RPG games. RPG like that. All right. And additionally now we call our add include function and say, please give me also the genre. Let's just say this exists. All right. And I also want to include the DLCs. And now I want to order them actually. So add order by game name. All right, that's it. And now off to the controller. We add another endpoint here, this time RPG with DLCs. Let's say get RPG games with DLCs. And here, this is now a new RPG games with DLC specification. All right, and that's it. We restart the application. There we are. We have our new endpoint. We try this out, hit execute. And now, as you can see, we've got Skyrim with the genre, which is an RPG, and also the DLCs here, and the same for Witcher and the genre and its DLCs as well. And of course, order by maybe does not make lots of sense here because of the ordering already, but let's just say we also want to add an order by descending, right? I told you this is pretty much the same thing, so let's just implement that real quick. Order by descending, and here also order by descending, and descending. All right, and now in the query builder, do it like that. If this is not null, we do exactly that stuff, descending. All right, and now in our controller, or rather in the specification, we call order by descending, save everything, restart the application again. There we are, and now Witcher 3 is on top. All right, so I hope you learned something. If so, please guys, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, it does make a difference. And if you want to see more specific patterns, other patterns like or similar to the specification pattern, anything that helps making your code more clear or learn something else, then please tell me that in the comments. And of course, if you want to support me, then check out the link in the video description, because there you can also become a patron. So thank you so much already to all my patrons. I love every single one of you. And now I can only say thank you very much for watching, and I hope I see you next time. Take care.